You are now listening to the Going Deep podcast with your hosts, Kevin Massari and Mike Bunt, live from the Cover One Sports Network. Here we go.
Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Massari, here with Mike Bunt. We have a lot to talk about today. We're going to go through Brandon Beane's offseason plan, a couple of things that we think should get done, really have some projected pathways that we want you guys to kind of chime in on what path you might think is the best path for course of action. Really looking forward to this edition as it's time to get into the offseason, but we'll be right back with you.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop, deep throw, and it is hauled in for the touchdown. Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action. Allen deep downfield, wide open.
All right, everyone, welcome in to this edition of the Going Deep podcast. It is one of my favorite times of year, Mike, as we enter middle of February, early March, as we get into the team just getting back from the Senior Bowl. We have some plans at the Combine coming up here shortly in Indianapolis. And then it's time. It's go time. It's franchise tag time coming up next week. We'll get some news and rumblings around what's going to go on there. We've got quarterback moves around the league that should put pieces together on a lot of free agent plans. What's going to happen with Derek Carr, Lamar Jackson? What's going to happen at these a plethora of still open offensive coordinator positions? We saw the Eagles coordinators both leave today for head coaching jobs. Do we see where the Eric Bieniemy story goes here in the next couple of days, 2 weeks, see where he ends up, see what KC looks like as obviously one of the Bills' main competitors. The Bengals hold on to their coordinators, which is big news for them, and Anarumo and Callahan. So big news out of Cincinnati. They both were in the running for those final two jobs. As we got later on in this process, I figured that might be the case with why would they be waiting till after the Super Bowl if those two were their top candidates. But Mike, lots to do today. How you feeling?
Feeling good, Kev. First off, happy Valentine's Day to you and
too.
Your wife.
Yeah,
it's a great day to celebrate talking about my first love, which is the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
My wife is okay with that.
Okay.
We have plans later in the week, but she's chanting in the background right now. But yeah, great weather, Buffalo today, 50-degree day, great day to celebrate, and lots to get to with the Buffalo Bills and their offseason now that we have a Super Bowl champion, and we know what the Bills have to do to get to that point next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. The news is coming out awfully fast with around the league. It just feels like faster. It just keeps getting faster in terms of what's going on. Interesting moves with quarterback. Like, I talk about this all the time. Like, where were these quarterbacks during the Bills drought years, Mike? Where were they? Derek Carr, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers. It's insane. The Bills, like, at best, there was really no free available quarterbacks between like 07 and like 17. There were zero available quarterbacks to the point where, there seemed to be worse reaches in the draft. It's interesting to where these veteran moves, people don't want to pay anymore for quarterbacks that they don't think is going to be the top 5 guy. It just seems like if you're not a top 7 guy, you're not safe. Is that kind of how you feel right now with these moves between last year, now maybe even more this year?
Well, I think it's just the game has moved that way with how much offense has transformed football over the last 2 decades. You look at it now, 20 years ago, you watch any random high school game, it was mostly run-based attack. Even in most colleges, they were run-based at that point still. You've gotten to the point where almost everyone playing from the high school level forward has the ability to throw the ball. What's that done is basically you have seen the evolution of quarterbacks, and then with the rules changing, softening, making things more difficult for defenses, you have so many talented QBs across the league. So if you don't really have one of those top 5 guys, it's really hard to think that you have a legitimate chance of winning a Super Bowl unless you go on some crazy run. So I think a lot of teams are now recognizing that they don't have a Pat Mahomes, that they don't have a Josh Allen, a Justin Herbert, even now Jalen Hurts and so forth, that they really go into the year with a minimal shot at best.
I think Brandon Beane alluded to this, like all the 7-on-7 camps, the receivers that are developing as well. That's what's interesting about the hits on receiver. And we're going to get into that this offseason. Mike, we were talking about it a lot last season. There were still some moving parts. It didn't necessarily always make sense maybe to go receiver first last year. They went fast and furious with the A.J. Brown trade and a couple of other, Marquise Brown. A couple of things happened fast and furious in the draft last year that, then the receiver started going off the board. There were still some decent names there. Obviously, the Bills felt the need to trade up a spot for Kyer Elam. So last year we were talking, get Josh Allen weapons. I remember like a whole month we had that segment basically talking about that. Khalil Shakir was on that list. We were thinking third, maybe fourth round. Bills obviously traded that fourth to move up a spot after McDuffie went off the board. A lot of people are saying Trent McDuffie may have been the Bills' favorite option there, and Kyer Elam was the last guy they had on their board. Sounds plausible to how that could have played out, but they got rid of that fourth. Technically, that's definitely where I would have targeted Shakir. I thought he was like a late third, like where Bernard went. That's kind of where I had him valued. Obviously, the league disagreed. He was more of a fifth round pick, but that's really the weapon they got for this. I mean, Jamison Crowder on a relatively low end veteran deal last year. I just don't think it was enough. So I want to start there at the receiver position for the offseason, and that's kind of path one. We're going to call this path one. Is upgrading the options at the receiver position, Mike? How important is that to you right now that you look at the roster at the receiver position? Obviously, you have Stephon Diggs. You have a lot of people talking about, their interesting feelings around the whole Diggs situation. We've seen some already in the chat talking about maybe trading him or different options there. First of all, his contract, even if you want to trade him, is untradeable in a way. The Bills would need to get like a gluttonous amount of draft picks to do something like that, like more than they traded for him, just because they would eat so much salary. It just doesn't make any relative sense. Why would you trade your receiver one when you just signed him? I don't know. I guess weirder things have happened, but let's factor him in the plans at least for now. And then you're looking at the rest of the roster, Khalil Shakir. You have the ghost of John Brown past. You have the ghost of Cole Beasley's past. I mean, you have obviously 1 year of Gabe Davis on his escalated salary after his performance boost ought to push his fourth round pick salary up a little bit into the $4 million range, roughly low threes. So you're factoring all that in. What are you feeling at this receiver? Because I know offensive lines, the topic du jour. We're going to get into that here shortly, but we're going to stay with path one, which is receiver. What's your feeling? And we talked about it all last year, but tell me what you're thinking needs to happen at this receiver position as we just watched A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I know KC has like a litany of random receivers, MVS. They traded in the middle of the season for Tony. Mecole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster. Obviously, they have, Travis Kelce. Where do you stand in this receiver discussion, Mike?
Yeah, behind the offensive line, I think wide receiver is probably the most important area for this Bills team to attack this offseason. And there's a couple different ways that they can go about it. They can try to get a guy through free agency. Maybe you attack a Paris Campbell, try to get a guy similar like that. You could go the trade route. And I know everybody's bringing up Hunter Renfrow. Doesn't seem very likely, but you never know. Maybe that's an avenue that they pursue. I really do think the draft is a possibility, especially if some of the linemen that they might like in the first round are off the board by that point. So some names, like off the top of my head, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I'm in love with him. I think that would be an instant impact player for the Bills as long as he's healthy. Another name, Jordan Addison, if he's able to fall. A Zay Flowers out of Boston College. I think it's vital for the Bills to add weapons. We both believe that Khalil Shakir could be a difference maker for the Bills going forward, but we are not 100% positive that this is going to be that year. Maybe. I don't want to go into 2023 with maybes. I want definitives. So as much as I like Khalil Shakir, I think you need to find at least someone to go along into that top 4. There's always a possibility you could double dip where you could re-sign Crowder and then still draft someone in the first or second round, or you could, like I said, bring in a Paris Campbell and draft someone in the first or second round. The real question is, do you go after a slot person who, while technically they'll be considered your number 3 receiver, might be your number 2 target person at receiver, or do you try to find Gabe Davis's replacement, assuming that you think he's going to be gone after next year, and basically say, Khalil Shakir, the slot is yours. Let's go that route and basically draft for the future. I'm personally more in favor of the slot route, where you have Gabe Davis as your 2, you stick with Diggs, and then you bring in another high-level weapon to be your 3, and then you could still have Khalil Shakir as a credible number 4. So that's kind of where I stand. I'm open to different ways of attacking it, but one thing I know for sure, if they don't manage to get someone in free agency, I'm hoping that they get a receiver at least in one of these top 2 rounds here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on par with that. I'm even taking it a step further. I tweeted on the Super Bowl, get Josh Allen weapons. Everyone's like, disagreed from like, no, O-line, like they're not mutually exclusive. Like you can get both. Like
the concern with O-line is when you're at least listening to a lot of these experts right now, there doesn't seem to be a ton of depth in the draft beyond the first round guys, the top 5-6 guys overall. So that might force the Bills in a situation where they might need to take one of their guys in the first round or second round in fear of not having other guys available later. But I'm fine with any combination that involves an offensive lineman and a wide receiver in the first, second round. Other positions, I guess if there's a high enough ranked safety and you don't like the group of wideouts that are there, or the group of linemen, I could be open to a safety. I could be open to the right defensive lineman if there's a high enough ranked guy on the board. But my preference this year is attacking the offense. We've said it the last couple of weeks. We need to make it to where Allen doesn't have any excuses in 2023. Let's solidify this unit.
Yeah, and definitely want to dive more into that point in a moment, as number 2, path 2 is going to be that offensive line path and kind of how we can piece that together. But kind of still staying on path 1, which is receiver for now, I like Roy Collins' point that of Greg here saying that hope is not a plan. I think we need to continue to be aggressive and attack receiver. You look at what Joe Burrow's been able to do in his career. He's always been surrounded by the best. You have Justin Jefferson with him. You have obviously Chase. You had Terrence Marshall. You had and Clyde Edwards-Helaire to kind of come out. That's when he really boomed in college. Then he went right into Cincinnati, kind of had an interesting year, got hurt, then came back with Chase, got them Chase. Then you obviously have Boyd and Higgins. And he's just always, and even Hurst now this year kind of developed into a top 12-ish tight end. So he had always these weapons, and Mixon's obviously still, they don't run the ball overly effective, but they still have a decent running game if they want to use it. Samaje Perine's a pretty good backup running back. But if you're factoring in this path of receiver, I think the Bills need to be aggressive. I think it's a really tough position to score. I think it's really expensive. I don't think that you can afford to sign Gabe Davis, so you can almost scratch him out. Is it worth trading Gabe Davis today to get maximum value? It could be in the cards. I think I really like him as a receiver too, but it's not a matter of, do I think he's good or bad or garbage or whatever terms we want to use. I like Gabe Davis, and I think he's a good receiver too. The numbers prove to it. Advanced statistics point to it. There's a lot of things that point to him still being a serviceable number 2 receiver in this league. However, if I can cash out on his value, I think you need to do so, as I really do believe he's worth more than Bills fans think in terms of compensation.
What would a team give for a guy like
they gave 32nd overall pick for Chase Claypool, right? So their numbers are very similar, like literally spot on similar. So to me, I think that a pick in the 30s, I don't think that that's crazy. Late 30s, early 40s, I don't think that that's nutso. And
the real issue though is that, and it's not the way it used to be a couple decades ago, but it's never a guarantee when you're drafting a rookie wide receiver that they're going to be a high impact player right away. And while a lot of people have been dogging Gabe Davis in the last couple months, it is hard to replace 836 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. So even if you were able to get a second round pick, as intriguing as that would be for Brandon Beane to maybe get another high level player at a cost control area, I don't think Josh Allen and the Bills offensive players would be in favor of that type of move heading into the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, the counter is like, you're not going to be able to sign him. You're going to lose no draft you're going to lose zero compensation next year. The point is not necessarily whether we're going to, nickel dime how good he is, more or less that you can cash him out now as a smart move, to a lesser extent what the Chiefs did with Tyreek Hill. Now, if you look at the whole situation, though, like, is it Josh Allen, though? Like, he made John Brown. He was able to develop the most out of Cole Beasley. They were a good combo. Even Diggs, a lot of people say Diggs made Allen. Well, Allen helped boost Diggs' numbers as well. So at some point, like, is it hard? Like, because it's Josh Allen, they throw the ball a lot. And whoever's aside from Stephon Diggs may see, at least even on the low end, on a floor end, might see similar numbers. So that's the argument we don't have enough data yet on. And this year might give us a tell.
I don't know if Allen is great.
That's the part.
I don't know if I'm at the point where he necessarily makes players. I think he can help players take a step beyond what they might be or what they should be at a certain level. In obviously his rookie year, he was playing with far inferior talent, but you saw with a crap group of receivers his rookie year, he did struggle to complete 54% of his passes. Even 2019, when he had John Brown and he had Cole Beasley, while they both had what would be career years for them, it's not like the Bills' passing game was elite. It truly never got elite until Stephon Diggs became part of the picture. So, and that was one of the reasons why I always kind of got on people that said, well, Tua's only good because he has Tyreek Hill now. Well, 90% of quarterbacks are going to be much better when you give them a top 5 receiver in football. So we have not seen Josh Allen be a Pro Bowler without Stephon Diggs. So I want to believe that Allen is capable of elevating everyone that he has on the roster. But I do want to see it with some other guys first, especially with the way the Bills offense runs with a lot of these passes down the field. I 100% believe that a guy like Pat Mahomes elevates everyone around him. And I think Allen elevates the entire Bills offense, but we will see with that point.
I just don't think Mahomes is the only one. He's number 1 in the league. He is the MVP. Behind him is obviously Allen, Hurts, and Burrow, and literally is that order in MVP voting. Because if you're saying only Mahomes does it, then no one else does it. I just think Allen does give a boost to.
He definitely gives a boost. I'm not.
And
saying
I think he makes
a boost. It's just there's a lot of reasons why that boost is there. Yeah. Some of it, obviously, Allen plays the biggest factor in it. The Bills also are an incredibly pass-heavy offense, and when you have a guy like Stephon Diggs, who's a superstar, it does make life easier on the rest of the unit. My question would almost be that when you have Diggs going for over 1,400 yards, having 3 straight seasons of over 100 catches, why aren't we seeing, I guess, more production from some of the other guys on the team? And I understand there's only so many footballs to go around. There's only so many guys you can get involved. But it really has only been Stephon Diggs that has put up elite statistics on the Bills with Allen. Dawson Knox had touchdown production 2 years ago, but even in Dawson Knox's great year, it wasn't like he was lighting it up for Travis Kelce or Darren Waller.
Well, let's get into the Beasley point, though. I appreciate you, Whittle. Thank you so much for the super chat. They just replaced Cole Beasley 100 yards with Davis. Okay, yeah, fair point. Cole has a much better catch and drop rate. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's some credence to signing Cole Beasley. Like, if he wants to play, it worked out with the team, and he comes back at I would assume, a fairly low rate. I don't know that he did anything to elevate over minimum. I like him more than Jamison Crowder. I would personally choose Cole Beasley back on this roster as Josh safety blanket, as his potential slot as of now, previous to the draft, when you sign him in March, call it, and kind of going in that slot role and to be a vet presence in the room, kind of like a player's coach. A lot of benefit there, in my opinion, to Cole Beasley coming back on that, especially on a very reasonable deal, obviously under $2 million. To me, I think that's a no-brainer that you would bring him back, and I'd like him back over a couple of the other guys on the roster, Mike. So do you kind of feel that way, that let's get him entrenched at the slot day one? Obviously, then you still have Davis and Diggs on the roster as it sits today. That seems like a pretty good start to path one, which is re-signing Cole Beasley, or do you stand elsewhere?
I'm not against bringing Cole Beasley back. If he wants to come back, I'm willing to have him if he's willing to take a very minimal veteran salary. I don't want to pay him anything if he's to come back. And my main reason being, we kind of know that Khalil Shakir is going to be more of a slot guy than an outside guy if he's in the NFL. And I guess you could have no better teacher than Cole Beasley. But if you bring back Cole, that kind of gets in the way of my plan of drafting a wide receiver early. Because in that scenario, your 1, 2, 3 goes back to obviously Diggs, Davis, Cole, and then you have Shakir be the number 4. If you're drafting a wide receiver, say a Jackson Smith and Jigba or an Addison Falls, they're playing for the number 4 receiver spot, or they take over Cole Beasley's role. I don't know if I need Cole back at this moment. It's not that he wouldn't be productive. I don't know if fans are going to expect him to be the same guy that he was 2-3 years ago. And I don't know if he's capable of being that guy anymore. Not that he couldn't be productive, not that he couldn't help out. I actually, if they were going to bring a guy back, I would more so want to take that chance with Jamison Crowder, just because Crowder is a little bit younger. Yes, he did not look good in his limited action with the Bills last year. We know over the course of his career that he's been a productive player. He is on the younger side compared to Beasley, around the 30 mark. So if they were going to bring one of the guys back, I would take a Crowder, because then if I end up drafting someone and say Crowder's not good enough to make it, I'm just like, okay, let's just cut ties. We move on. We're good with this. I don't know if it's as easy to move on from a Cole Beasley, especially a veteran presence like that, who's well-liked in the Bills locker room. So if they're going to bring one of the two back, I would say Crowder. I would have a little slight preference for Crowder. I'm not going to be mad if it's Beasley. The one wide receiver I just don't really have much patience for going forward is really Isaiah McKenzie. I don't know where he really fits in. Last year, he went from to basically exclusively wide receiver. If he's not going to have a role on special teams, I don't know what McKenzie really does for this team going forward. And I say this as someone that actually vouched for him and enjoyed him in his earlier years on the Bills. I just don't see him having a significant impact going forward.
Once again, Whittle, thank you so much for coming back in. My point was Davis is replaceable. Rookie receivers can contribute early because of the amount of 7-for-7 they play. Absolutely true. Brandon Beane will tell you as much. The amount of 7-on-7 receivers play develops receivers, continues to be a really high value selection. Even the Bills, with the limited usage of Khalil Shakir in the 5th, he almost was an overvalue pick in terms of what he was able to limitedly produce for the Bills this year, especially if you factor in the playoffs. He was really good for the team, and his draft value proves it. And I think he's going to further that as a good pick. Right now, he's right even with his pick value, but he will continue to grow on that. But yeah, Shakir should start in the slot or at receiver too. I think that's a growing precedent. We're talking about Beasley. I seem to like Beasley. Whittle, you like Beasley. You have Mike maybe preferring more Jamison Crowder in the slot.
Realistically, I probably don't want either of them.
Okay.
If there's a way that the Bills get one of their guys in the first round. Okay. If you ask me, who do I want?
I'm just talking about a starting point. I'm not talking about the end-all solution. I'm saying, where do you start as the offseason begins?
Realistically, if you're telling me, if you had your choice, who is the Bills' number 3 receiver in 2023? Mm-hmm. My answer is Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's who I want. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't know if he's going to make it down to 27. Probably not. There's 3 guys that I really like in this draft that have at least the possibility of dropping down to 27. None of them are guaranteed to get to that point. If somehow Flowers, Addison, or Jackson Smith and Jigba fall to 27, that's my pick. No hesitation. Seriously, no hesitation. I take any of those guys right away, and I slot them right into my 3. And I know going into the year, nobody can just worry about Diggs anymore. We're going to have the ability to do some fun things on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And that's where I stand, Pat. That's why, kind of wrap up path 1 is receiver in the first round. Jordan Addison's just a dynamic slot receiver. I just think he would bring a next level option to the Bills. I personally not saying that Bees is the solution. He can't get you Yak, and that's obviously what Josh Allen is going for. He still shows some wiggle and ability to get open and beat players off the line, especially in zone coverage, where McKenzie struggles. Where I think to end of the McKenzie talk though here with this solution is, I think there is a path to him getting traded for a late round pick. Cody Ford's worth a 5th. I think the value contract that McKenzie's on for a year would absolutely get you a 5th or a 6th round pick. I'm pretty sure about that. I think there's a team out there who would utilize him at his rate in their offense, might see his positive plays and be a man beater. I really think that that's a possibility for a team out there that feels like they play against a lot of man coverage. I think that there could be a path to him getting traded. I like the starting point of Beasley because I think he would come at vet minimum with the vet minimum benefit, which means he doesn't really cost much more than a UDFA on your salary cap as a starting point as a player's coach. But from there, obviously my path 1 includes, and this is the path I personally prefer, is adding a dynamic receiver like you see in the Philadelphia Eagles, like you see in the Cincinnati Bengals, like you even see in San Francisco, is a dynamic number 2 receiver, and you're not going to be able to sign Gabe Davis. We can sit here and argue how good he is, where he ranks on the number 2 receiver chart. It doesn't matter. They're not going to be able to resign him. So say we keep him, say this second round pick trade doesn't work out that I'm talking about here. He's not resigning. So do you cash out now or do you play out that year with him? That's a decision Brandon Beane's going to need to make over the next month and a half. Personally, I trade him. I cash out his value. I think that's the smart move. Not because I don't like Gabe Davis. I love Gabe Davis. I actually probably like him more than the majority or the standard Bills fan. I think some of his drops are totally misplayed. I think he's in a lot of 50-50 ball situations. The 0 to 9 reception point is not been there for him. He's dropped a couple in that range that have hurt him a lot. But overall, he doesn't get a ton of looks. He gets very few looks, like Jalen Waddle. They're very few looks in the 0 to 9 range. So ultimately, I'd like to see him move on if he's not a good fit in the Ken Dorsey offense on a 1-year deal. You're not paying up 10 to 12 to 14 based on how this year goes. He could fluctuate based on how he finishes up his contract year. But ultimately, it's not because I don't like Gabe Davis. It's because I think it's the smart franchise move, and that's what we're doing. The path forward for Brandon Beane, it might be to include Gabe Davis and trade him away. So that might be the way that you get the max compensation, especially if you're able to plan like we are, landing a Jackson Smith and Jigba or Jordan Addison early on in the draft. And that's the path I prefer because, yes, it's not quite as deep at some positions like tackle. I do like a lot of interior guards as this draft goes on. I think there's some day 1 starters on day 2. And we're going to open up now to path 2, which is path 2 offensive line first and foremost, maybe putting aside receiver. I know this is a more trendy path for Bills fans right this moment. I'm still weapons number 1. I get the offensive line path, but we have to say the amount of money spent on Bates, on Dawkins, and on Mitch Morse is $31 million. Okay, for 3 players, not cheap. They also like Tommy Doyle a lot as their 6th offensive lineman and guard. That's what the role he played last year and was pretty good at it. And they were expecting high hopes from Tommy this year, as well as they still like Spencer Brown. He was getting back treatment before every game, as well as COVID early on this year. He looked slow, but he's got that 10 RAS, that super athletic profile that Cromer likes, that this team likes. I don't know that they're going to give up. And on a year we're talking about salary, we're talking about we don't want to pay this player this much, this player that much. On a year where he's making, close to $1.1 million, it's not quite mandatory to replace him this second. The big gaping hole, though, is right guard to me because you're going to move Bates back to his natural left guard, in my opinion. Or if not, left guard. So we need a stud guard. And a lot of people are pointing right now to Osiris Torrance from Florida being that guy. Or if you want to go the free agent route, there's a couple names. Powers from Baltimore or Siamalu from Philadelphia had a pretty pivotal false start that then next play later, Jalen Hurts fumbles the ball, which changed the game. However, he's been a really good guard. Both of them have been high-end players. If we make one move this year, and, Brandon Beane alluded to no splash players, Mike, but I don't know that's a guard's considered a splash if it's not like Quentin Nelson, that it's a splash player. So do you think, what do you think about path 2, which is either first round guard and Osiris Torrance, maybe Schmitz from Minnesota. He's more in the 40s and 50s range right now, but that's just conjecture. That's just me assuming where he's going. That might not be where he really is going to go. Or he could be available for the Bills in the second round. So what are you thinking about path 2, which is a potential high-end guard free agent to take over for Saffold? And look, you plug that high-end guard in next to Brown, next to Morse, and then obviously Bates, who's been serviceable to good, and then Dawkins, who, he's been good at times. He's been high-end at times. He needs to get back to that high-end left tackle play, but that's still a pretty solid line if you plug in a really, really day one pivotal guard.
Yeah, so I'm open to either path. If you have a guy like Osiris Torrance available at pick 27, that's probably where you go. Even if it's probably where you go. It's tough, though. I'm not going to say that's an easy choice compared to a Jackson Smith and Jigba or Jordan Addison. I just think the Bills will probably go that route, even though I love the wide receiver route. It is interesting because when you mapped everything out, we talk about how poor this offensive line played this year, but the reality is there really still isn't that many positions on the line that are actually open.
Right.
And that's the difficult part, because when you have what is a mediocre line and you think, oh, there's places all over the line that you can replace, that's just not the case. Deion Dawkins is not going anywhere. Mitch Morse, as long as he decides to play football, is not going anywhere. And like you said, Spencer Brown has not been good his first 2 years, but the Bills invested a third-round pick in him, and he has that athletic build where they're not going to be ready to give up on him going into year 3. So like you said, you really have 2 openings at both guard positions. Bates is probably going to return and be a starter once again. So you're really looking at one starting position up for grabs, and that'll be Roger Saffold's spot that he leaves. So they can go a couple different routes. I wouldn't mind them selecting multiple offensive linemen in the draft in the early rounds if they're able to get significant value in the first 2-3 rounds. It does weaken out quite a bit later on. So I don't know if it's one of those where you're really going to be able to add much to your depth by drafting linemen late. But it's going to be interesting because I actually read something the other day about Josh Allen's pressure rate and Pat Mahomes' pressure rate. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I apologize about that. But I believe what I was reading said that Josh Allen was pressured on around 35% of his dropbacks this year, which is it was a high number. It was in the top 10 for pressure rate. And Josh was obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the league, if not the best, under pressure. Pat Mahomes was pressured on 34% of his dropbacks, had similar numbers to Josh while under pressure. We talk about the Bills' offensive line like it is the worst thing in the world. Yet people talk about the Kansas City Chiefs' offensive line like it's incredible, much improved. And obviously they had a hell of a game against the Philadelphia Eagles, who had 70 sacks entering the postseason this year. So I'm not going to doubt anything about the Chiefs' offensive line. But the point being is if Allen and Mahomes are pressured around the same percentage of their dropbacks, and the Bills were also one of the highest yards per carry teams in the NFL, in spite of this offensive line, what does that tell you about what is holding back the Bills' offense? There's 2 things that come to mind. It's either the person calling the plays in the scheme, or it's the person that is throwing the ball to them at times. I'm never going to say that the Bills' offense isn't elite. We all know it's a top 3 offense. But what is what is the gap between Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen? We talked all year about how they were 1A and 1B. I think what we discovered after this past season is Pat Mahomes is in a tier of by himself right now. He lost one of the best weapons in football in Tyreek Hill, and their offense got better. They switched everything from a deep shot offense that was explosive and went over the top to a short game, quick passing game, scheming guys wide open. And yes, Andy Reid is an offensive mastermind. Eric Bieniemy is incredible, and they were able to do a lot of things. But I just want to ask Bills fans, if Josh Allen lost to Stephon Diggs, where does the Bills offense rank overall? They're not a top 5 offense. Then you could question if they're even top 6, 7, 8 offense at that point in time. I just find it pretty interesting overall, because with that narrative, surely the Bills' offensive line needs to get better. Yes, they need to bring somebody in, but are you expecting it to be drastically different next year, Kev? Even if they do bring in a first-round guard, even if they find a free agent to plug in, are they suddenly going to be much improved? I don't think we're gonna be talking about much different on this offensive line next year.
I think we all have recency bias, and we just forget the stable stretch of 3-5 football in the middle of the year last year that cost the Bills even number 2 seed to host the game against the Chiefs last year. They were the number 3 seed because they played some pretty sloppy football offensively and defensively at times last year. We just forget that, first of all. Second of all, as you go into this year, to your point, look, Josh Allen definitely lacked some pocket awareness. He had that elbow injury, a grade 2 sprain. Unplayable certain sports. You'd be on baseball, for instance. You'd probably be shut down and monitoring Tommy John. His decision making was a little bit off, and so was his accuracy. So what does that mean? He was on Kyle Brandt today on Kyle Brandt's basement for his usual appearance, saying that they're on the same page when it comes to changes. What does that mean? What are they on the same page on? So that's what's interesting to me, is that they're agreeing that there needs to be changes. And I think when you have a stud, I think the Chiefs offensive line played pretty good this year. However, there's some metrics that show they're on page with the Bills offensive line in certain metrics. So that's what's interesting to me, is how pumped up that line got. And all we're thinking about is the Bengals getting some pressure in the snow game and them faltering. The entire team faltered. Literally across the board, from Diggs to Allen to the O-line to the D-line. That was awful. Really, Kyer Elam played pretty good. Matt Milano was
apart in the biggest game.
Was okay.
I don't really even know, because the metrics show Kansas City isn't just 100 times better than the Bills. And I think that's what the fans struggle with. The Bills beat Kansas City this year. And like we said, maybe
by beating their offensive line, funny enough.
Yeah, and the thing is, NFL is matchup driven. It's a week to week. Against the Chiefs, the primary reason why the Bills won that game late, outside of Josh Allen being incredible, was that Von Miller had 2 huge sacks in pivotal moments in that contest at the end of the first half, and then on the fourth quarter, on a third down, to give the ball back to Buffalo. So it's if you ask me, do I need the Bills offensive line to improve? Yes, I do. But am I expecting it to make a drastic difference in the Bills offense if they do make that improvement? I don't really see it making a drastic difference. What I need that difference to be is Allen to have the confidence that on a 3rd and 9, that there isn't going to be a blitzer that just goes untouched and gets to him. That on a 3rd and 10, that Saffold's not going to get bull rushed and somebody just going to be in his face within a second and a half. It's the big moment that I think the Bills need to step up. And that's really not a talent thing, in my opinion, because like we said, as bad as the Bills offensive line was this year, they were able to run the ball effectively, much better than what they were in the past. PFF had the Bills with a tremendous running game, grade overall this year. The Bills, you look at James Cook, what he averaged, what Devin Singletary averaged, and then even Josh Allen with his scrambles. they were able to run the ball. The problem with the Bills is their timely running when they need that 3rd and 2, when they need that 3rd and 1. Their situational play, I think, has been poor at moments. But overall, they do a lot of things that are decent. And then if we're being real, Kev, sometimes Josh gets the feet where he wants to get out of the pocket. There's times Josh has a pocket and he runs out of it. And we don't criticize it because he's dynamic outside of it, and it plays to his strengths to be on the move and to let guys try to get open down the field because it buys you more time, and that's his comfort. But a lot of quarterbacks would be criticized for some of the things Josh does. So it's one of those. I don't want to, and I agree with the 1 point, Sale. Nobody ever is schemed wide open. We were blessed with Brian Daboll. He's fantastic at that type of stuff, setting people up, running something a few times, and then changing what you end up doing later in the game. So not everybody's going to have that level of success. So that definitely needs to improve. But I do think when we look at what the difference between the Bills and the Bengals and the Chiefs right now, it's that Mahomes is on a level that neither Burrow or Allen are on. That's the number one difference. And then the number two difference, the Bengals and the Chiefs get more situational clutch plays. Not saying the Bills aren't capable of it, but at times you see Kansas City get that fumble recovery touchdown. You see them make those big plays. Like the Bills sometimes don't make those plays, and that's what you need in order to win championships.
Very much so. To kind of wrap up path 2 before we get into our third and final path, is kind of, let's go through real quickly what path 2 could entail. But so we talked about O'Cyrus Torrence. Obviously, we talked about the 2 potentially high-end free agent guards, if that's the way that they want to go. But it doesn't need to just be high-end guards only. There's definitely a path to a really productive offensive line here for path 2. Luke Whippler from Ohio State really could play guard, could play center. It's a really strong option. Andrew Voorhees from USC, another guy that I really like. Jarrett Patterson from Notre Dame. He's a guy that could come in and be productive in day 2, maybe even early day 3. Steve Avila from TCU. There's just, Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas, maybe a little bit later on in the draft at center. Obviously, we talked about John Michael Schmitz, probably in the 30 to 50 range right now for him. And then obviously, you're going to have Skoronski, Paris Johnson, Anton Harrison, Broderick Jones, Jalen Duncan. Those are a few of the high-end tackles that may be gone by the time the Bills pick. So
would you even take a tackle?
I wouldn't. I know Bills fans are all over it. Like, the upgrade difference right now that people feel, maybe if a Broderick Jones falls,
that's one of those things though, where like you're talking about a higher level prospect dropping to you. So in that situation, yeah, you're open to it because you're getting a top 20 talent at 27.
But let's say the top 4 are gone though, Mike. Like Skoronski's gone, Johnson, Harrison, Jones are all gone.
Now you're looking at no way.
Now you're looking at Jalen Duncan, DeJuan Jones. I mean, look, I don't feel overly good like we need to make that the only priority position is replacing tackle right now. I like Matt Bergeron a lot from Syracuse. Could he pop into guard? He could have some position versatility. So there's definitely some names of players that I really like in this draft. And I don't think that it only comes at the cost of O'Cyrus Torrence or maybe Paris Johnson from Ohio State. He's not going to fall in my opinion, or Broderick Jones, but it's just a matter of, I don't love the tackle route. I think you can get a tackle later on to develop and push him. I think the veteran tackle push is more in line with what might happen here. Like we saw a little bit with Quesenberry, but to another level, to a step up. Could it be talked about like someone like, I don't know who could become available on the free agent market, but there are definitely some tackle names out there to pay attention to as we come closer to cuts. I think that having a really high-end backup tackle that can really push Spencer Brown might be the way I personally approach tackle in this specific offseason, if I'm being, rather than a high-end first round pick only tackle. That's the only way you think we can upgrade tackle. I don't know that that's where they're going to go with that. Tyler Lewan could get caught. I think he could be a perfect fit with his mean streak and his ability to be good. And coming off of his injury, he might take a swing tackle role, to kind of
That's
recoup
probably the
that.
best way to go about it, though, when you're talking about it.
Right.
For tackle, you can't go first round of the draft.
No.
Because you're talking about a 50-50 spot. If you draft someone in the first round, you're telling Spencer Brown that he's now a backup.
Mike, to your point, is upgrading Spencer Brown, and some people will say yes, at one point, at a really reduced salary, is that $1.2 million, is that over, say, Dwan Jones, whoever might be there? How much, like you said, how much better are they? Maybe they kick out and save a sack. Maybe they don't.
That's what I'm saying. I really don't think that dramatically better. And I think it's easy to think, well, we improved the entire offensive line, suddenly magically Josh Allen's going to have all the time in the pocket and we're going to be much better. But the truth of it is, a lot of times you make offensive line changes and you're still the same quality offensive line. So that was the whole point of Aaron Kromer coming into the organization last year, was that he had a good track record of developing guys and turning things into solid projects. So I don't know if I'm at the point where I just want to basically spend money or go high round pick on a tackle when they still might have faith that Spencer Brown can turn into somebody right away. I know with each season it gets a little bit more daunting of a task, but I'm not ready to give up on Spencer Brown at this point. I think guard is going to be the much addressed situation. And then maybe, and I know this isn't really an off-season move or anything, but I think just as important to the Bills' offensive success next year and taking it to the next level is what adjustments do they make to their scheme? What adjustments do they make to their
Mike,
attack?
you don't worry about it. That's all buttoned up into path 3 here in one moment. But to wrap up path 2, if you move Bates to left guard, you get an elite rookie guard in between Morse and Bates, Morse and Brown. That could be a huge. That's my path. Like, you get a stud right guard alone, that elevates the entire offensive line. That elevates Brown. That elevates, Mitch Morse is good in his own right, but that elevates the entire line play. Bates now in his more pretty fitting left guard spot. Dawkins takes another step in the right direction, and the offensive line is pretty good. Is it the best?
Not like they're horrible. Dawkins, we obviously have confidence in.
Yeah.
Morse has had a track record of being
I like Bates.
A good player. Bates is not. He is at least an average player when you look at him. So those are good points, Kev, because realistically, they're not 2-3 moves away from being halfway decent. We went into last year thinking they were halfway decent. We thought Roger Saffold and Bates were going to help them take a step forward. It didn't work out that way. But
the issue is Saffold wasn't the right fit.
About recency bias a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we're victims of recency bias when you lose a playoff game the way they lost it. And the truth of it is, you're never as close as you think you are, but you're never as far away as what you think you are. And as frustrating as this Bills offensive line is, if you get Bates at left guard and then you can get a serviceable rookie or even a veteran at the other guard spot, I'll look at the line and say, you know what? They should be at least average next year. And for Josh, I'm not saying average is good or the desired offensive line that you have, but average is better than what we got this year and should be enough. When you have a quarterback that's a $40+ million quarterback, you got to make do with deficiencies in certain areas. You're not going to always be able to have all pro players all throughout your team. You're going to have to pick and choose. And while the Bills have put big money on defense in recent years, that comes with some sacrifices on the offense. Hopefully that starts to change where we make sure that Allen has the line in front of him. He has the wide receivers, the running game, and we accept that defense will go up and down year to year based on the variables that they face in a given season.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty interesting point that I'm always a firm believer of. Yeah, like everyone's like, well, you should have like this player at right tackle, and you should have him backing up this player. And it's like, you don't have all pros behind all pros. Like, it's not Madden. It's not Madden Ultimate Team. Like, you do need to rely on guys like Terrell Bernard at times. And, obviously we're not focusing too much on defense here in this edition. We'll get into defense in a later show, but you're not going to just have this gluttonous amount of high-end backups the league doesn't even have 5 starting offensive linemen on each team, let alone 7 and 8 and 9. So really, I know we dog Saffold, but literally he might be an okay 7th or 8th lineman, between Butker. Here's my ideal backup 4. It's Butker. Maybe Saffold comes back at a team-friendly deal. It's Tommy Doyle. So to me, it's and then another variable tackle there. So to me, Alec Anderson, who they've liked a lot of in UCLA, he did get elevated for the Bengals game, found his season on the IR later on in the year, but really talented player from UCLA. So right then and there, you have 4 players I really already like, and then you add a veteran tackle in there, and fine. We need to plug
what
it
also
in.
hurts the offensive
right
line?
Guard.
You know what also hurts the offensive line? When you have a passing game that's basically one of the highest average depth of target passing games in the NFL, where you need time to develop almost every route, and you have an offensive coordinator that's not scheming great routes in his offense. So, yes, fixing that alone could make the offensive line look much better next year. Sometimes offensive line, when you see pressure on a quarterback or quarterback gets sacked, it's not anything to do with the line. It's about how long the quarterback's holding the ball and how long things are taking to develop down the field. So I do think it is entirely possible for this offensive line to look much improved next year, but it's going to depend on the moves they make. And then, like we also said, the scheme, which I know you want to get to with this next segment going forward.
Yes. Next path, third and final path. We're going to call it the improvement path, the BPA path. And this is going to include a couple of different paths to it. So we talked about really focusing on the offensive line in path 2. Path 1 was obviously about weapons for Josh Allen, still a path I like. As you get into path 3, though, and it's one path that Brandon Beane might follow more than we think, or that he has historically followed. It's the BPA. It's the just get better in random spots path. It's, do you go Bijan Robinson in the first round? Do you get one of these plethora of free agent running backs, Saquon Barkley, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, maybe it could be anybody, Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott. Could one of the other big name running backs be available with all these coaching changes? It's get a running game. A lot of people say, how can you get pressure off of Josh? You're losing Singletary. I mean, duh. You have just James Cook. Do you bring back Nyheim Hines at $5 million? I don't. I need a big reduction. I know it's marginal. Everyone's like, well, $2 million here, $2 million there. I think it adds up, but I want to save the whole entire amount, not just the $2 million pay reduction. I want to save it all. And ultimately, I don't hate the path of getting a really good running back, plugging in that right guard everybody's talking about, and going off of it that way. So path 3 is an interesting path. It's running back. It's maybe tight end. It's, do you go with one of the best tight ends available on the board? I don't know. They tried to run 12 personnel in training camp, from what I've told, a ton. And what I was able to see, OJ Howard comes in just as apparently terrible. And they really ate the entire contract to get rid of him. But 12 personnel was in the fold for this offense.
Kev, I think they really did want Rob Gronkowski.
I believe it.
I believe it. I really do think that they were hoping
we called him for sure. Yeah, we called him for sure.
And we talked a lot last offseason about 12 personnel and about how we thought the Bills were going to implement it in their offense. The fact is, during training camp, very little success. During the preseason, little success. And they just gave up on it. They were like, you know what? This isn't working. We're not going to try to force something that we're struggling with. Screw this. We're done with it. But I think it's clear they wanted that to be part of the offense. And maybe that failing so bad, not that it was ever going to be a significant part of the offense, but maybe that failing did lead to some changes early in the season with how they were attacking teams. I know people are going to laugh at the Gronk comments, but Rob Gronkowski actually spoke about it and said the Bills talked to him last year in free agency after Brady had retired. And Gronk said, if I was going to play football last year, it was going to be in Buffalo. We were talking money. It just, he said he wasn't in the proper mindset to come back. and continue playing, and ultimately decided I'm going to be done with football. But it would be interesting. How would the Bills offense have looked differently had Gronk decided to come to Buffalo? And I think you could say drastically different, because think about the woes the Bills had this season. A lot of it was in the red zone. Which is kind of confusing, because you have a powerful, big quarterback that also has the ability to run. That should be the most dynamic weapon you can possibly have, where you can do QB power, you can do QB sweeps, and then also have the ability to do play action. You should be almost unstoppable with a guy like Josh Allen at quarterback in the red zone, but it wasn't the case this year. And I think with a better tight end too, they could have done some more dynamic things. That said, Kev, if you really want an instant tight end contributor, you're going to have to take one early rounds. There's more pressing needs right now. I can't see the Bills going that way. Running back, you and I both love Bijan Robinson out of Texas. Great player, generational type talent. You and I were both high on Breece Hall a couple of years ago. The thing is, with how many guys are available in free agency right now, in addition to the conversation about there being a lot of quality running backs in this draft, there is no need to reach for a running back in this draft, and there's no need to try to get the best running back in free agency. In fact, you're probably better off if you did the free agency route, waiting it out and seeing who's desperate to sign for a team at the end and giving them a minimal offer and say, take it or leave it. You can either join one of the best offenses in the league and continue your career, or be a second stringer somewhere, or take your running back in the 4th, 5th round where you still have value. One guy I do love in this draft, I don't expect him to be a Buffalo Bill, but I love Sean Tucker out of Syracuse. If there was ever a way where he fell to like the 3rd, 4th round, probably not likely, that would be an option for me, just because you have a back that has pass catching dynamic and on top of a great a running game. So those are possibilities. It's just hard to see the Bills investing in those areas when there are other options that are that far greater.
Yeah, and let's talk philosophy of roll 3. Roll 3 is just getting better. It's the Brandon Beane route, really. It could be a combination of things we talked about in path 1, in path 2. But option 3 is really, let's just get better as a team. It's to the scheme issue. Now, this is what I wanted to make sure we talked about today. You have a guy like Eric Bieniemy available. Do you pick up the phone and see what's going on with him? Like, obviously, head coach is out now. All the head coaching jobs have been filled with the 2 Eagles coordinators who are going to the Colts and the Cardinals. But ultimately, like, he wants to make a name. He wants to be the CEO of an offense. And everyone's like, well, why would you go from a first-time play caller to a first-time play caller? Well, he's led the best offense in the league for 5 years. It's a first-time play caller, but it's not a first-time offensive coordinator. Like Ken Dorsey was. It's someone that knows how to manage his players, who's worked with a top-end quarterback, who has also worked in one of the best offensive schemes ever, and has all the schemes that schemed open Patrick Mahomes, and to a lesser extent, you're talking about Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore in back-to-back areas. Yes, he's learned from the best. So to me, it's a matter of, I think the Bills need to get better there. I don't know how much longer I can wait. Like, I'm talking 1 year max is what I can wait. If there's no better improvement, I think it's done at that point. But ultimately, like Bieniemy, it's not often you have a player like a coach like him. If he was calling plays, he wouldn't be in contention for the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator. He'd be a head coach. So like, we need to get off this, like, well, from first-time play caller to first-time play caller. To me, it's a matter of, he's worked with the best offense in the NFL, the best quarterback who he could go. What a storyline for Josh Allen with Eric Bieniemy and him being the CEO of the offense, to playing Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Like, that is an incredible storyline to talk about. And he's learned from the best. And one final nugget on why you need to increase the scheme and get people open, like we saw in the Super Bowl, is really important. And there was one time a head coach of the Minnesota Vikings in 2010, Leslie Frazier took over for the Minnesota Vikings, and his assistant head coach and running back coach was Eric Bieniemy. and they are said to be very close. So to me, it does not take much for Leslie Frazier, and maybe we all talked about in changing defensive coordinator all offseason. Maybe there's a plan here in place. Maybe Al Holcomb takes over next year or at some point. But there is definitely, maybe Leslie Frazier picks up his old buddy and they talk and see if there's any fluidity there and any changes that could be made. Look, we talk about all the time, like, who are you going to replace Sean McDermott with? Who are you going to replace Leslie Frazier with? Is it just going to be Al Holcomb? What's the difference? But there is a direct replacement at the offensive coordinator position. Maybe you don't make a move at offensive coordinator until you have a guy like Eric Bieniemy to do it for. So if you didn't know you had Bieniemy, you're not going to just fire. You're not going to just fire Ken Dorsey. You're going to need a path, and just like in life, anything, you need a reason to do it. And to me, Eric Bieniemy is someone that has been just a stud coach, and calling plays or not, he does nothing but helps design these plays, from Mahomes' relationship with him to even Andy Reid's relationship with him, calling him out. The first thing he did in this post-game interview was call it Eric Bieniemy. To me, I just think that there needs to be a conversation. I'm not saying anything's going to get done. Everyone that says 0% chance he does this. The conversation, he's a free agent as of now. He's interviewing in Washington. He was also interviewing in Baltimore. That position's since been filled by the Georgia offensive coordinator. But to me, I make the phone call. I say, hey, we have this open receivers coach, Mike. We have this open receivers coach available. What do you think about that? Obviously, he's not going to take a receivers coach position, but you just call him on the guise of that, see how he's feeling, and you get a talking. You get Leslie in the room. You get a talking. And you see what happens if he is creative enough, if he is able to call his own plays, if he is an upgrade, because path 3 involves upgrading at the offensive coordinator position. Not just, we're talking about running back here, we're talking about tight end, but ultimately we've had many comments like none of this is going to change unless you get better from the offensive coordinator position. And this is what includes in this path. And ultimately, maybe it's a path that Brandon Beane likes more than Kevin's done path number 1, which I think is the most realistic. Path number 2, which some people like it with the offensive line upgrades. Or this path, which is maybe picking up the phone and seeing what Eric Bieniemy wants to do in Buffalo. See if that's interesting to him. See if it's interesting to come work with the next best quarterback in the league, improve his numbers, get to the final dance, and get your head coaching job. So ultimately, I think it's interesting. And path 3 also involves, Mike, yes, it could be off the cuff idea. There are a bunch of tight ends that could be available here to supplement this idea. It's, does Michael Mayer fall? I don't think he does from Notre Dame. Dalton Kincaid from Utah. We've seen a lot of Luke Musgrave at Oregon State, and Darnell Washington's another huge name behind. He would have even been great behind Bowers, but Bowers is their number 1 guy in Georgia. So there's definitely, there is a good amount of tight ends this year compared to years past to do this path. But I think that could be another weapon in the red zone. Talk about Gesicki. He's like a true slot receiver, not really a tight end. That was much talked about lately. So, and then there is a good amount of free agent tight ends more than normal. You have Dalton Schultz, Evan Ingram. I think Hooper's got some, Robert Tonyan, Irv Smith Jr. So there's definitely Hayden Hurst. There's definitely some names of some players that, you could go this route, and Foster Moreau. You could definitely go this route and be successful because, I think that could be a route that they go, and then all the rookie tight ends, Mike. So I think that's kind of packaged all together, and then that's picking and pulling, maybe upgrading safety, maybe ignoring receiver a little bit, but then getting a running back at some point in this draft. Like you said, Sean Tucker in the 3rd round. There's a couple of other names that I really do like here that could get this thing going in the right direction, like Dwayne McBride from UAB, Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky. There's definitely Sean Tucker, as you mentioned, Zach Evans from Ole Miss, Tank Bigsby from Auburn, Tajay Spears from Tulane. There's definitely some names of players from 3 to 5 that could add to this path. So, Mike, what do you think about path 3, which includes maybe picking up the phone, calling for Eric Bieniemy, just seeing what's going on? No one's saying anything more. That's free. He's a free agent, getting on the phone, maybe looking at tight end a little bit more than people are talking about, and maybe doing something at running back. And then, plugging in a right guard. I think any path includes a right guard. So what are you thinking about that?
So plan 3 is kind of we're open to suggestion type plan.
Yeah.
So I'm not against improvements in any category. I do like the idea of improving at tight end number 2, but I don't think if the Bills were to add a tight end number 2, that it would be the type of guy that you or I would want or the type of guy that fans would be clamoring for. I think you and I, we liked a guy like Isaiah Likely out of Coastal Carolina because we respected what he could bring to their passing game. My belief is if the Bills add a number 2 tight end, it's going to be someone to help the running game and have a minimal impact in the passing game. So I still am a big fan of Dawson Knox. I think he still has high-end potential. A lot of it just comes down to finding a way to implement him more. And they did get him more involved as the season went on, but I'm very curious why the Bills took more than half the season to really start using him at a high level. We mentioned running back. They're going to get another running back on this roster one way or another. I don't believe that Devin Singletary will be back. So will that be an upgrade? We'll see on the field. As far as what my plan 3 would be, it's not bringing in an outside coach like Bieniemy or bringing in another coach. It's expecting that year 1 to year 2 jump out of coordinators. From Ken Dorsey. I need Ken Dorsey to take a leap forward. I don't believe that just because Ken Dorsey had a shaky first year with Buffalo that he is just some horrible offensive coordinator that doesn't know what he's doing. A lot of fans will make that out to be the case. And yes, Eric has pointed out examples where Dorsey has had limited concepts that have hurt the team in their ability to score and put points on the board. That said, if the narrative before the year was that it's difficult to be a rookie offensive coordinator in this league and that there was going to be some regression, and then you end up having the number 2 metric offense in the NFL, I think that does deserve a little bit of accepting and take a little of the heat away. We can't just be all about, it's going to be there's going to be regression. There's going to be regression. There's going to be regression. And then when there is a little bit of regression and they still have a top 3 offense, be like, oh, we got to fire the guy. If that was the case, most offensive coordinators would be fired right away. And Dable, they had been fired from 2-3 previous jobs in the past. So it's not like even when Brian Dable came to Buffalo that people loved him. People were still calling for Dable to be fired a couple years after he was the Bills' offensive coordinator. When he came to Buffalo from Alabama, some people considered it an uninspiring hire that was only made because he had local ties to the area. So I don't want to just give up on Dorsey. If the offense continues to look underwhelming next year, I'll be more entertaining to that idea, but I more so want to see what adjustments are they capable of making. Can he scheme guys open? Can he notice tendencies that other teams are doing? We talked about, much talked about after the Super Bowl was how Kansas City discovered when Philadelphia was playing certain formations, they would let another guy take the wide out, and when the player in motion cuts back out, they would be uncovered. And how they capitalized and scored 2 touchdowns off of it. Can Ken Dorsey start to discover that stuff? That's the stuff that's important to me right now, is can he take that leap forward this year? And I'm not going to rule out that he can. Like I said earlier, we need to see, is Josh Allen capable of running different types of offense? Can we go to a quicker passing game at times? Will we have the slot receiver where on 3rd and 5, you trust him that he's going to get open and that you release that ball in 1, 2, 3, he's going to be where you're expecting him to be. Those are the things that I think the Bills need to take significant steps this year. I'm not even really worried about the defense, quite frankly, because regardless of what the defense does, it's going to be up to the offense to win most of these games on a weekly basis. But I have maybe a little bit more confidence in Ken Dorsey than most, but that's because history says it takes time as an offensive coordinator. And who else are you going to replace him with? I know people are going to say Bieniemy, but like you said, there's a reason why he hasn't been hired for these head coaching spots. And the reason he is looking for these offensive coordinator jobs at lesser teams right now, it's not because of money. It's not because they're better opportunities. It's because he knows that he needs to prove himself most likely at a lesser position, a lesser job with lesser talent surrounding him in order to be considered seriously for these other head coaching spots.
Absolutely, Mike. Like I said, there's definitely a pathway to Dorsey getting better, but he doesn't get more than 2 years, unfortunately. You just don't get a third, in my opinion, with this.
2 years is fine, Kev. Here's the issue, though. We're not patient right now because we know that we're in this Super Bowl or bust era, and that's fair. And I'm okay with moving on from him after year 2. But they brought him in because he was Josh Allen's handpicked guy, and we don't even know if Josh Allen wants to get rid of him at this point yet. I'm going to assume probably not. So if that is the case, you want to know how you can make your franchise quarterback even more discontent with things after not winning a Super Bowl? By firing his guy that he enjoys playing under and working with. And yes, at some point in time, you need the results to also be there to justify having your position. But we talked all last year about why did guys like Tommy Sweeney make the team? Why did some of these other guys make the team? When you have a franchise superstar, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. Sometimes you make decisions to make sure your guy is happy. And I wouldn't doubt that keeping Dorsey is something that makes Josh happy.
Yeah, and it is. He said it. I mean, he said it once again on his interviews and in his locations. I think that path 3 kind of concludes with doing BP. I mean, it's BPA essentially. It's best player available, maybe in free agency and value, and it's in the draft. And I think the Bills want to run the ball better. And I think that was the idea with OJ Howard is he's a beast. He was supposed to be a beast in the run game. He was supposed to help out there, help out in the red zone, and be that solution in multiple personnel packages, not just in 12, maybe in 22 personnel, maybe lining up in the slot, doing different things with Knox on the field. So I think that there is a pathway. There's been a tell between calling Rob Gronkowski to paying a little bit of money for OJ Howard. I think that there is a tell at the tight end position that they could be more interested in that and approving that than we think, and going a different direction elsewhere. So there's plenty of tight ends available in free agency, plenty of them available in the draft, a little bit more than normal compared to other position groups, that it could be interesting to see if they go that route, improve the running game, get another running back in here, plug in right guard, and all of a sudden you're talking about an upper end offense, Mike. Okay, we've laid out the 3 paths. You don't need to, talk about them too much. We'll revisit these later on this offseason. Which path you going with right now?
I'm going to go with the most fun path, and that's path 1. I want one of those stud receivers. And the main reason being, Kev, is we've talked about the Bengals offense and their big 3. And I think that could make a huge difference for the Bills, is adding a third dynamic weapon in the passing game. I know Knox can also be a huge contributor, but I need that third big weapon. Offensive line, we talked about it. If a guy like Osiris Torrance is available, I'm open to it. I'm cool with it. Would not be upset at all. But as we mentioned, while the offensive line needs to improve, there's really only one real opening unless they find a way to get upgrades at both guard positions or they move on from Spencer Brown. So I think the wide receiver one is the one I have maybe the biggest fan of, but I do think it's possible where you can get a guard and a quality wide receiver that could be immediate impacts if you play your cards right. If you get a Torrance in the first round, there's still guys that you might be able to get in the second round, depending on how you go about things, that could come in and be a 3 or a 4 receiver.
That's still path 1 to me. Getting a middle round.
So my preference is kind of a mix of path 1 or path 2. I'm open to mixing it up. You go either way, but I want guard, wide receiver, and you can mix it up first or second round. The only thing that gets me off of it, as I said earlier, is if you have a safety, one of the higher rated safeties available in the second round, or your wideouts and your guards that you want in the first round are already off the board, then you could go with someone else because there'll be a top 20 talent falling to you in that situation. But definitely a mix of path A and path B.
Interesting. As we kind of preface this offense here, we have the film room coming up here now on Cover One at 9:00 Eastern Standard Time. They'll be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly around the offense. So tune into that with Eric Turner and team to get into this discussion in even more detail. We're talking about it from a subjective opinion-based replacements, but they'll be kind of diving into the numbers a little bit more analytically on their show coming on the Film Room at 9:00. So that's going to be a great addition. So make sure you tune into that. And as always, please smash the like button. Just being really important to us as we can continue to make great content all season long. As I know, coming off the Super Bowl, everyone's looking to take a little break. Doesn't stop for us. We continue on all season long, every Tuesday at 7. So I really appreciate you smashing the like button and comment your favorite path. Comment, tweet at us. Get us in there on your favorite path as well. I want to hear everything that you guys have to say, and please subscribe as well. There's been some issues with iTunes and with Apple in general, so please resubscribe to the podcast. 5 stars there is always appreciated. So please like us as well for our on-demand listeners, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We really appreciate you guys from tuning in here. Also, special shout out to our new show producer too. Wanted to make sure I did get a shout out into him as well. So definitely, we're glad to have him here on the Cover One team. He does a lot analytically with Eric and does special projects, special graphics, etc. when we have a special assignment for him.
Let's get some people to follow him on Twitter too, AJ Cybulski. He's going to be a big part of our show going forward, intern for Cover One. So definitely want to shout him out, Kev. We want people to follow all of us. So definitely. And
AJ's favorite path is path 3, Mike, is his favorite path, which is interesting. I just tend to think like I'm with you on path 1. I think that path 3 is where Beane generally goes. Like, sure, I'm kind of guessing at what that might entail because I'm not Brandon Beane, but that's generally some pot culmination of what that would look like. It's improving running back better than you need to do with Singletary. He looked pretty poor in the postseason, in my opinion. It's increasing tight end. There's some tells here with Gronk, and as we've talked about on this show, and it's doing things a little bit different. Maybe it's changing some things up with the scheme. Maybe it is giving at least Bieniemy a call. It's there's a plethora of options that could be into this unit, and maybe replacing tackle would fall within plan 3, but no, that's still probably more plan 2. So like, to me, it's kind of that off the cuff BPA. Maybe it is safety. I'd hate to see it go from Poyer to a rookie safety there, but maybe that is something that would be what they think would be needed. I can't see the team being that much different there, replacing Poyer with a rookie safety. I just think you need to improve that organically. But Mike, what a great show. As always, 7:00 on the Going Deep podcast. Special shout out to producer AJ as well. Seriously, please, 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. That would mean so much to us. Please smash the like button. Special shout out to Whittle as well. Thank you for the super chats. Always enjoy talking ball with you. Whittle, want to have you on the show next month on March. We're going to go through some of our favorite prospects. I know, Whittle, I know you have a plethora of guys you want to talk about, so we'll make sure to get you on that show. And I know you want to talk about tight end. I know Whittle likes path 3 as well, Mike. As I know he's pro. Let's get it done that way to increase the running game. But from the Going Deep podcast, Kevin, Mike, producer AJ, and the team, tune in to 9:00 though for kind of continue this offensive discussion, but more in what did they do, good, bad, and ugly perspective. So make sure you get on there and you get the best film review, in my opinion, in the Bills land, and that's the Film Room. So from everybody, and then special shout out to Greg Thompson's show Friday at 9:00. He's going to get in especially the Greg Thompson show, which is going to be a culmination of things around the league, other topics, funny things going on in Twitter with some great show producers there, of special guests, of people that are great in the community. So make sure you go out there and tune into our new show on Friday and to all the Cover One shows that we have on this network. It's a wonderful experience with multiple different content producers. I see things differently than Aaron, than Anthony, to you, Mike. So there's just a good view of different shows going on. And our cap special coming up. Our cap special is going to come up very shortly, which we're each going to play a role on an off-season prediction and see kind of this conversation, but more in depth with specific numbers and specific paths. We were talking general paths, but these are going to be specific players with specific monies. To all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you stay on here at 9:00. But from Kevin and Mike, this is the Going Deep podcast. We'll catch you here next week, 7:00, as usual on Tuesdays. And here's to a joyous offseason. We'll catch you guys next time.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown. Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play